On, Andrew?
Yeah, most people are on. There's a few people not here yet, but they're coming in slowly.
Yeah, Andrew, can I let you know that I'm here? I've got a problem with the camera, but basically I'll go and chat if I need to speak, okay?
Okay, thank you. It might be worth saying, members, if you do have any connection issues, I found out from IT the other day that if you put yourself, instead of having all people visible at the same time, if you put it to just the speaker, you might save yourself some bandwidth and you might stop being cut out.
Right. As I see more and more people arriving, I see our young people, I think, on the whole have arrived. If we can perhaps start the meeting. I'd like to welcome you all back in this new year and a new set of meetings. Can I remind you that we are being recorded, so please try and be polite. Can you also remember and have your microphone on mute unless you're speaking? Because there's nothing worse than a lot of background noise when you're trying to hear what another member or an officer's saying. I would really like to thank Amy Reynolds for arranging for the young people to be here for the first item. We have 2 young people who are going to be staying for the entire meeting, and that's Claire and Emma. But for the first item, we will have Jennifer, Kaylee, Ben, Ryan and Victoria, and I think you all know Victoria. She's been here on a number of occasions before. She's well known to all of us. I'm going to be a wee bit biased here, and I'm going to welcome Ben because he is replacing Jamie in our Bells Hill area, and it's nice to see him for the first time. So, if we can go on with business, have we any declarations of interest in terms of ethical standards from anyone? Let's open the chat bar. I hadn't done that. That's Councillor McManus. And what item is it, Councillor McManus?
Agenda item 10, Chair.
Right, okay.
Apologies.
Any other declarations of interest?
Convener, can I just ask Councillor McManus to explain the reason for the declarations of interest, please?
Okay, Councillor McManus.
My employer accepts food from the council's foods partnership.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor McManus. Andrew, do we have any apologies?
Yes, Convener. I've got an apology from Councillor Redding. I've also got an apology from Councillor Catherine Johnson, but she has been substituted by Councillor Sophia Coyle today.
I'm not sure, is Councillor Quigley on the call or not? Have you noticed, Councillor Andrew?
I don't believe she's here yet, but let me just double check.
I know she was.
I can't see her on the list.
No, I know she was trying to get a substitute, so possibly she would be an apology as well.
Okay, I'll note it down. Thank you.
Right. Okay. With no further ado, if we can now go to item number 1, and that would be yourself, Liz, who will be leading this, well, the young people in general, but if you could start.
Thanks, Convener. I would just want to welcome our young people to committee and congratulate those that have just joined who have been recently elected as members of the Scottish Youth Parliament, and more importantly, members of North Lanarkshire Youth Forum. And the young people and Amy have prepared this presentation, so without further ado, I'm happy just to pass over and let Amy and the young people take you through our paper, and I'm happy to come in at the end and answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Liz. So, is it Amy starting or one of the young people?
Morning committee, it's Amy Reynolds, Development Officer for Youth Participation. This paper has a 2-part, and Emma, who's one of our newly elected MSYPs, will present the first part, with Claire McVeigh, MSYP for Motherwell and Wishaw, presenting the second part. So I'll just pass over to Emma to start us off.
Welcome, Emma. Thrown in at the deep end.
Good morning, committee. My name is Emma Prack. I'm one of the newly elected MSYPs for Cumbernauld and Kilsyth. During 2020, North Lanarkshire had 6 vacant seats for the Scottish Youth Parliament. At this point in the term, resignations can be expected as young people move on to other commitments such as jobs and university. Although 2 of this year's resignations were due to this factor, the other 4 were a direct consequence of COVID-19 and the impact it had on young people's education. Following a selection and recruitment process using social media and local youth forums, 12 candidates presented their manifestos using online platform WebEx. Panels of young people were assembled from various high schools, voluntary organisations and community-based youth groups, amongst others. The by-elections were held online using WebEx, allowing us to involve 52 young people in the decision-making process. The evening began with a briefing on what the Scottish Youth Parliament was and the requirements of an MSYP. Young people were then divided into breakout sessions reflective of their constituencies. This allowed panels to focus on the candidates specific to that area. Each panel was given the opportunity to hear from each other and ask the candidates any questions. The panels were given time to discuss and cast their vote. One of the panel members stated, "I enjoyed being part of the panel as I got to make my own decision on what I think was needing to be changed for the youth in Airdrie and Shotts. This was my first time being involved in an election, and it was great that we found all about SYP and what MSYPs would do. This helped me make my decision on who to vote for. I think it's good that the council we live in puts the effort into making sure young people's voices are represented." The winning candidates were, for Airdrie and Shotts, Jennifer Deegan and Kayla Gardner; for Bells Hill, Ben Campbell; for Coatbridge and Crowston, Jodie Gemmell; and finally for Cumbernauld and Kilsyth, Abby Lennon and myself. We will join the current MSYPs, Ryan Kelly for MSYP for Coatbridge and Crowston, and Claire McVeigh and Victoria Orlicka, MSYPs for Motherwell and Wishaw. Most of us have made it along this morning to introduce ourselves. All of the young people who were involved in the election process have been encouraged and supported to get involved in our local youth forum and other youth work provision. This process has made North Lanarkshire the first local authority to hold a by-election in this way, with the support of our support worker, Amy, being asked by the Scottish Youth Parliament to present how this was conducted to other support workers in Scotland tomorrow evening.
Thanks,
Thank
Emma.
you, Emma. And who are we over to now?
Claire.
Right, thank you.
Good morning, committee. My name is Claire McVeigh and I'm one of the MSYPs for Motherwell and Wishaw. I've been an MSYP for 2 years and I've been fortunate enough to attend 5 national Scottish Youth Parliament sittings. My 2 first sittings were face-to-face, however the last 3 I've attended have been online due to the restrictions of COVID-19. The Scottish Youth Parliament has been unable to hold an in-person national sitting since October 2019. The March 2020 sitting was cancelled and subsequent sittings have been taken place online, with the March 2021 sitting already planned for online. The Scottish Youth Parliament have begun discussions with youth work managers near the end of 2020 regarding the first in-person sitting post-COVID-19. The national sitting would take place at the end of June 2021, and we're seeking approval to host this event. There has been 73 SYP national sittings since 1999, with North Lanarkshire hosting in 2012. However, a post-COVID sitting will require suitable planning. The Scottish Youth Parliament and youth work managers are monitoring the COVID-19 restrictions closely and understand that any plans will be made in line and robust and comprehensive risk assessments. Although still in discussions at the moment, plans will be assessed to hold the national sitting within North Lanarkshire, and we're making use of our amazing outdoor facilities and opportunities as much as possible. We'll ensure that every avenue is considered and will include plans that show options for our current and possible future COVID restrictions and tiers. As the MSYPs, and in line with the plan for North Lanarkshire approved by committee in March 2020, we want to showcase North Lanarkshire to our colleagues across Scotland. We know that some of them may have visited North Lanarkshire before, however we want to show them and any new visitors just what North Lanarkshire has to offer. If restrictions allow the sitting to go ahead, regardless of host, it will be SYP's first ever blended sitting. It will use a mix of both virtual and face-to-face engagement to ensure that all MSYPs have an opportunity to take part. We are keen to host this as it would be once again demonstrate North Lanarkshire's ability to lead national on a rights-based approach to youth voice and participation. As mentioned earlier, we are keen to ensure that young people see our wonderful outdoor green spaces such as Strathclyde Park. North Lanarkshire Youth Council has always been keen and interested in promoting positive mental health, something we've tried to continue to do throughout this pandemic. If we are to host the first ever post-COVID in-person SYP sitting, we would not only promote the benefits of being outdoors from a positive mental health advantage, but would also ensure that this sitting provides an opportunity to educate, inform and take action on the climate emergency, forming part of our preparations for COP26.
Thank you, Claire. Two excellent presentations there, and I'm not surprised that the Youth Parliament would come to North Lanarkshire. After all, our MSYPs managed to gain so many awards the last time. What a wonderful group they have been. So you new people coming in, you've got a lot to live up to. I see that I have a thanks in from Liz, but I have two questions, one from Councillor Linden and one from Councillor Brannan McVeigh. Councillor Linden.
Many thanks, Convener. Questions and comments. Hopefully you can hear me. I think I was having some issues this morning, but I'm seeing your nodding head, Convener. It tells me that you're able to hear me loud and clear. First of all, congratulations to all those elected to serve. A real privilege and a real opportunity, and wishing you all very well indeed. Look forward to meeting with our local MSYP soon. And it's all right to be biased, Convener, as long as it's for Bellshill. So I welcome comment at the beginning. Again, I guess two questions, primarily focused on officers. Actually, first of all, as a general observation around our youth participation infrastructure, wondering if officers are going to be bringing forward plans in due course that can reiterate how the work of our youth parliamentarians and our youth participation infrastructure through our youth forums and youth council can better align more directly with direct change, making the agenda of this committee more directly reflect the agenda and priorities of young people in North Lanarkshire, because it seems to me that there's a great deal of dialogue taking place within the youth forums, youth council and the youth parliamentarians, and it would be great if we could start to see some of that filter through more directly into the, I guess, the working programme of not only this committee but right across corporate council. And I think that with new MSYPs and new passion, we'll start to see that filter through. So a question to officers in that respect. And then secondly, I feel somewhat doom-mongerish in coming in on the second part, but you'll appreciate that as a member of the council's COVID leadership recovery group, we have to ask these questions, and members, I'm sure, will recognise some of the concern in terms of the physical setting in 2021, which is indicated here in June, July 2021. I woke up this morning to emails and a press statement in relation to calls for May's Holyrood election and indeed the by-elections in North Lanarkshire to be cancelled, from one of the political groups in the council, and that's obviously taking place in May. So as you'll appreciate, I guess somewhat concerned to see chat about holding a physical in-person sitting, I guess not too far after that. And obviously the priority, it's not to be partisan. The point is we want to make sure that our young people are safe, that it's the right time in terms of coronavirus, and the wider messaging. Ultimately, we're all having to do things differently, and I hope that we see a return to physical sitting soon, because I know the immense benefit of them, having benefited from one or two in the past, and I hope that our young people get that opportunity. But I guess a question to officers on that robust planning and those concerns, Convener. Thank you.
I think, Councillor Linden, what we are hoping for is, I think everyone hopes things will get back to normal sooner rather than later. And we would be delighted, of course, that the first sitting, whenever it takes place, will be in North Lanarkshire. To the young people, another well done from Councillor Feeney. Now, is it Amy or Liz who's taking the question?
I'm happy to come in, Convener. So, right, Councillor Linden, in your first question, totally agree. And for the programme of work this year, the officers have been charged with a whole look at our youth infrastructure structure, if you like. And one of the things that I would like to see is a kind of more robust, even a bit like our existing transformation committee type approach with our young people, that we can include a change board, and that we also build on national priorities, including the Promise and the UNCRC, and make sure that we have, you know, kind of a structure that is emerging with the council's priorities, and also making sure that there's synergies between what's happening with our youth engagement infrastructure and our vision for the 9 town boards. So, so you will see over the next year kind of changes. What you'll also realise from previous experience is that we come to this point where we've had our elected members for 2 years, and then there's a bit of a dip, and then, you know, kind of people move on, and then there's new MSYPs. There's not going to be an election in March. That's going to be delayed until later in the year. So it'll give our MSYPs a bit of a run to be able to be involved with officers and co-producing that type of kind of development. So that's the answer, I hope, to your first question. And the second question, we are concerned, obviously, about where we're at in terms of the COVID restrictions. And when we talk about a sitting, we are talking about a sitting like no other sitting, that in the past we would be using areas like the council chambers, whereas this time we wouldn't. We would be bringing the young people to North Lanarkshire. We would have a real focus on outdoor learning. As you know, kind of a couple of years ago during Year of Young People, our young people had an event in Pallasrig Park where we used camping, outdoor learning. We would do our kind of breaking into small groups, and we would hopefully do that using kind of outdoor learning, small groups, social distance. And, you know, we would use platforms like Slido so that people can vote remotely. What we plan to do is assess the situation with the Scottish Youth Parliament and the Youth Work Managers, and what we would be hoping for is a kind of final decision in the middle of April. If we put all these measures in, what could that look like? And if we feel that, you know, in terms of all the risk assessments, and that we don't get buy-in from more than 50% of the local authorities, then the decision with the SYP board will unfortunately have to go back to a full remote sitting. But what we're trying to do is say, right, well, if we can we run a kind of socially distanced sitting in North Lanarkshire where we won't actually have the 150 participants together at any one time. We'll have them in the park, we'll have schools, we'll use a mixture of technology, and the officers will continue to be as creative, and the young people will guide us on that as well, to look at how we do this, but, you know, kind of with making sure that we have the right risk assessments, and that we take in to consider the local restrictions and the national restrictions at that time. However, if that all kind of gets too much, then unfortunately we will, by the middle of April, make a decision that we have to continue with the July sitting as a remote sitting, and then we would be there in the standby to see when we can bring another sitting to North Lanarkshire.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Linden? No, okay. Thanks for all that, Liz. Councillor Brannan McVeigh.
Good morning, convener. Good morning, committee. Can I give hearty congratulations to all the MSYPs who were elected, and I've been delighted to meet a couple of them through our participation structure boards, and they've made a very valuable contribution. I remember the 12 sitting and positive. It was here in North Lanarkshire. It would be wonderful to have North Lanarkshire hosting again. And no mountain is too high for us to take that also the previous question demonstrate that it's not if the sitting will come to North Lanarkshire, it's a case of when. Because I think the sittings are, they're such a dynamic place of discussion, debate, relationship building, understanding the diversity and difference of what Scotland is, that really enriches the lives of the participate, and understanding the difference between our urban, rural and island communities. And I think that's a wonderful thing that SYP enables young people to explore, how an issue that affects everyone, how it translates to their local communities, is really important. It'll be aspirational, the date, and I hope we can get to the point where you're coming to North Lanarkshire. Any assistance in that journey at all, I will be more than delighted to do so. So no question from me there, just a concern that it's perhaps just a wee bit too soon, because ultimately we want the young people to be as safe as they can be, because if they're safe, then we know that they will blossom into the challenging debate that can take place in the new environments. But on yourself, to everybody in the team for bringing forth a blended approach, I think that'll be really valuable. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Brannan McVeigh. I think we've got to congratulate our team, headed up by Liz. But Amy does a tremendous job with our MSYPs as well. And I think it's something that's been in the pipeline for a long time, and we just hope that eventually the sitting gets here within the not too distant future. I understand that I don't see any other questions, and I understand that after this item, all except Claire and Emma will be leaving the meeting. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm sure you'll be back in the future. Victoria has been here several times, but actually in person in the chamber, and at some point I hope that will also be the case for the rest of you. It's been a joy to welcome you this morning. Thank you, and thanks for bringing them along, Amy. Liz, is there anything else you would like to say?
No, I think that covers everything. Thanks, convener.
You don't mean convener.
Sorry, have I accidentally muted myself? Sorry for that. It has its moments. If we can move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is the community boards, and it is the local development programme update, and that would be Matt.
Thanks, convener. This report provides an update on projects which have previously received approval at community boards and this committee. These projects have predominantly originated from local communities, and members should be aware where relevant have been subject to design work, local consultation and ground investigations, etc. as required. This process can result in projects not proceeding due to financial or site restrictions, or due to proposals being rejected by local community through consultation and designs. Where applicable, work could be undertaken to move forward designs for projects to prepare for consultation. On receipt of designs, these have been shared with elected members for further input, where applicable, and further discussions that can take place regarding individual projects. There have been some restrictions due to the pandemic, however arrangements have been made to maximise capital spend on projects. The report also gives an update on the budgetary position for projects, advises regarding the status of projects, which can show now that the majority of projects have now been completed across North Lanarkshire. Committee is asked to note the progress of the current LDP in relation to delivery timelines, the budgetary information and general status as outlined within the appendix, and approve in principle any other projects listed in Appendix 2. This also includes an additional couple of projects in Cumbernauld and Abbotsford Court and Torbreck Road, which had not been included in the previous appendix. Also, members are asked to note that progress of projects will be reported to future meetings of this committee. That's all in that report, Chair.
Don't see any questions. So do we agree the report, people? Yep. Okay. Thanks very much, Matt. If we can now move on to the next item in the agenda, which is the community safety strategy, and that is also yourself, Matt, along with Margaret Kelly.
Thanks, Convener. Just a kind of brief part of myself in this report, and this report is an update on the development and implementation of the community safety strategy. Recognising the importance of partnership work in this policy was developed with input from partners and local communities and took a wide view of community safety activity. It's an iterative document which will of course be subject to ongoing monitoring, evaluation and review. As part of this process, we'll also make additional reference going forward in the strategy action plan to further links with the community justice and the importance of the approach to contextual safeguarding. Convener, at this stage I'll pass over to my colleague from Housing Solutions, Margaret Kelly, who will provide some further background to the strategy.
Thanks, Matt. Good morning, committee. Good morning, Convener. As Matt said, this report is basically seeking approval on the new community safety strategy for North Lanarkshire, which spans the next 5-year period. It is the first community safety strategy for North Lanarkshire, and it provides a framework for partners working with the people of North Lanarkshire and communities to collectively improve community safety, and in doing so achieve a positive outcome across a whole wide range of areas of people's lives. It was developed initially due to the requirement for local authorities to develop and publish an antisocial behaviour strategy as set out in the Antisocial Behaviour Scotland Act 2004. However, it was recognised at a very early stage in this process that a lot of the activity around tackling antisocial behaviour requires a collective effort and partnership approach in order to address antisocial behaviour effectively, and that many aspects relate to other wider community safety issues. As such, there was a recognition across partners that we should harness this opportunity to develop an all-encompassing community safety strategy, given the broad spectrum of activity that takes place to address the issues to help people feel and be safer across our communities. A strategic group was established early on in the process and progressed the development of this strategy. A wide range of consultation took place to aid the development of the strategy and to make sure it was really reflective of the key issues affecting communities and people in North Lanarkshire. The full consultation report is available on the Council's website. In the strategy, there are 5 key strategic priorities to effectively tackle antisocial behaviour, to reduce serious violence and disorder, to reduce harm from unintentional injury and fire, to tackle gender-based violence and protect people at risk of harm. As Matt said, we'll do some further work on the community strategy as it progresses to ensure it's got a wider spectrum of activity around contextual safeguarding. And the last priority is to improve road safety. A range of actions are also set out in the strategy, and that will ensure that we deliver on these strategic priorities. The strategy itself links strategically to a number of other key strategies and plans, both locally and nationally, but ultimately it is aligned with the overarching ambition and vision for North Lanarkshire set out in the plan for North Lanarkshire. Progress, as Matt said, will be reported annually through the existing structures and community safety partnership and community boards, with a progress report being published on the Council's website annually. The first annual review is expected this December 2021, and there will be further work ongoing around a detailed performance framework which will be reported back. In terms of a quality impact assessment, that's been carried out for the strategy, and that's highlighted that there's been a range of positive impacts on a range of different groups and people who share protected characteristics. And it also has a significant impact in terms of reducing socio-economic disadvantage just due to the overall improvement and wider opportunities. So it's a really exciting and positive step forward, I think, just bringing all the different strands of community safety work together under one plan. That's me, Convener. Happy to take questions.
Thanks very much, Margaret. I know that most of the time it is Police Scotland and Scottish Fire and Rescue who are at the Community Safety Partnership Forum, but I certainly intend to have more of the partners at meetings because I think it's the working together which will make this a success. I see I have 2 questions. First of all, Councillor Linden.
Yeah, many thanks, Convener, and thanks to officers for bringing the report to us this morning. Just a brief question, Margaret and Matt, in terms of section 2.6 and indeed section 2.3 of the report on consultation and engagement, I just wondered what the scale of the consultation was in terms of number of responses. I know that section 2.3 has a link to wider reading, but perhaps just some top line information would be helpful in understanding the scope. And then secondly, I'm unaware, happy to be corrected, if engagement took place with the newly formed community boards, albeit we're only heading towards cycle 3 in relation to a community safety strategic group, but giving the localised partnership working is key to delivering on the ambition of the strategy document. I wondered what consideration was given to placing it through one of the community board cycles, and if not, then if that's something that can happen in the near future to ensure that as wide and holistic an approach as possible is adopted, particularly given the responsibility for delivery.
If I could maybe come in the second point first, Convener, if that's okay, then I'll pass to Margaret, maybe talking to consultation. Certainly in answer to your question, Councillor Linden, we're very much committed to involving the community boards and taking forward the implementation of the strategy. There was reference at previous cycles of the community boards about the consultation ongoing, encouraging people to participate in the consultation. But certainly as far as action planning and taking this forward, we're very much committed to involving as many people as possible within the community boards, and we'll make sure that that's brought forward and included on future agendas as part of the community board action plans. I'll pass over to Margaret for the other part of the question, if that's okay.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Councillor Linden. Just to give a brief overview in terms of the consultation, we had a range of different consultation opportunities. We had a large stakeholder event which was held quite early on in the process prior to all the restrictions being implemented through COVID-19. We had all our partners, we had the youth forum, we had lots of young people from our different youth networks facilitated through our colleagues from CLD. We had lots of local people and tenants and residents associations there, and that was held in January last year. On top of that, and that was a very good turnout, we had every organisation represented, and we had representation from across all the localities. We also had an online survey. Now that was on the council's website. It had 182 responses on the council's website, but we also put it on the Consol platform as well for some debate, and we had some comments and feedback provided via that mechanism. We also carried out a significant amount of consultation with our tenants and residents associations, and we carried out some food for thought sessions, and we did some internal workshops in terms of that as well. I'm just looking through the consultation report just now for us. So overall, the strategy was online for a period of 7 weeks for comments and feedback back, and then we had a range of different activities on top of that just to supplement that. We do intend as we go forward to carry out further consultation, because the strategy is not a standalone in time document. It is something that we will refresh as we progress through our annual review. And as Matt said, the community boards will be vital in terms of shaping the strategy as we go forward. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, Councillor Linden. Right. Okay, thanks very much, Margaret and Matt. Councillor Brannan McVeigh.
Thanks, Convener. I really welcome this underpinned by partnership and collaboration, not just with the, if you like, formal stakeholder agencies, but by our communities themselves. And it's great to see specific groups actually connected to that. And I suppose by way of information, under priority 4 about tackling gender-based violence, see, this is going to sound like a strange statement, but I'm particularly pleased to see approach, because against women is often an othered topic that is silenced and kept away from the mainstream. This is a mainstream topic. Champion of the volume of work that has been done there through the pledge, and I'm pleased to say that there's been very positive progress on the Equally Safe at Work accreditation, with an announcement to be made by government very soon. I'm very pleased to see this. So I suppose the challenge is, convener, about shared timescales on a collaborative approach. How are we going to help? I know that sometimes the reporting cycles of the institution partners don't always match. How do we use this collaborative approach to our better? I suppose, but how do we work together better and more?
That be yourself, Matt.
I think just to come in and that, we recognise the challenges of that, Councillor Brian McVeigh, absolutely do. And there's a number of ways we will try and link in with our partners to ensure that any feedback, any information that's shared is done in a way that is meaningful and is done at appropriate times. We can also look at the North Lanarkshire Partnership Board and the Strategic Leadership Group from there also, and use that forum to ensure that we're feeding in there when there's a variety of our partners already sitting in the one place, to ensure that that's then fed back into local groups and local partner organisations at the same time. So we're aware of those challenges, and we will work as hard as we can to ensure that's done in an appropriate manner.
I have to also say, Councillor Brian McVeigh, that Police Scotland and Scottish Fire and Rescue keep in touch with me on a regular basis, as they do with officers. So, and I'm sure all other partner agencies are doing the same. We are very much kept in the loop, so everyone is doing their best. I don't see any other questions on the chat bar. Do we approve and note the report? Yeah. Okay, thank you. If we can now move on to the next report, which is Leanne, and it's the development of locality plans.
Thanks, convener. So this report provides an update on the community and stakeholder engagement work that's been underway, designed to drive the development of the local delivery plans, and outlines the next steps in finalising the plans with communities for delivery. As previously highlighted to committee, this approach assists in meeting both the council and community planning partnership statutory obligations around community planning, but also supports the ambition within the plan for North Lanarkshire. Aligned to the community board model, work has been well underway to develop plans in the 9 areas, reflecting both key local priorities and also the ambition within the plan for North Lanarkshire. And that's about, and also ensuring that agencies are working with the council to support local community-led action in a more coordinated way. So committee was updated at the last meeting around the initial phase 1 of the development of the plan and the plans around community engagement. So phase 1 was around mapping across the key priorities that sat within the ambition within the plan for North Lanarkshire, but they were quite relevant at a locality level. Since then, significant progress has been made in delivering phases 2 and 3, focused on community and stakeholder engagement. Phase 2 was around partnership stakeholder discussion, and that happened across the 9 areas through existing partnership structures and networks, as well as through discussion through the NLP Strategic Leadership Group. Locality groupings from North Lanarkshire Council Communities Team, VANEL and NHS Lanarkshire's Health Improvement Teams were established to coordinate wider community and stakeholder engagement within each of the 9 community board areas. Phase 3 was very much targeted to wider community and stakeholder engagement, and a range of methods were used to gain feedback around local priorities and areas of focus for local people. These included stakeholder sessions, which were very much aimed at community board members, established community groups and voluntary sector networks, partnerships and partners and elected members. There was one stakeholder session per area plus targeted sessions as required. So for example, the Community Forum Network, the Health and Social Care North Lanarkshire Engagement and Participation Group, the Federation of Tenants and Residents Groups, etc., kind of requested a more targeted discussion. There were a range of community listening events that took place aimed at the wider community with a particular focus on encouraging and participation from those who may not otherwise participate in engagement. So there was one per area, but then there was also targeted engagement sessions reflecting seldom heard voices, for example, through social work services, through structures, existing structures around the particular kind of groupings, kind of targeted groupings. We also undertook a community survey with around 300 people responding to the survey. We are currently collating the information that came back from the survey, and we'll provide that to committee over the next few weeks when we've pulled the information into a clear report. And we also undertook some very targeted engagement with elected members through briefing sessions and a targeted survey. Elected members were also able to participate through a number of other approaches in areas. An overview of feedback from the community and stakeholder sessions for each area is attached as an appendix, and we'll, as I said, we will share the survey feedback once it's collated. An overview of feedback for each area was also presented to the community boards at the last cycle. The next steps in the process are that all community boards have agreed to set up a short life working group to refine the information that's been pulled together. You'll see the information at this point is still quite raw, and that's because we want to work through it with communities. We want this process and these plans to be community led. Bellshill requested a special community board meeting, which is a slightly different from other areas. Locality staff are arranging these sessions as we speak, and it's anticipated that there'll be a couple of sessions before the next community board meetings with a small group of people. Further mapping of priorities to existing locality structures. So I suppose it's not about duplicating. So, for example, if there are clear priorities that sit around youth or community safety, as we've already heard there, there'll be clearly the first point will be about having discussion with established structures and looking at how what's been raised by the community sits with what's already happening, or if there's additional things that need to happen. And ultimately it's about the relationship between those structures and the community boards, and that two-way kind of reporting and feeding in and out process. An outline of the priorities and next stage in delivery will come to the Community Board Cycle 3 in February, March, and a further report will come to committee providing an update on progress. It might be that in some areas we will look to establish subgroups of the Community Board to look at particular priorities that have been highlighted where there's not anything already happening within an area, or where it's something that's a bit more tricky, I suppose. So committee's asked to note the extensive community engagement work and findings today to support the work of the short life working groups and localities to finalise draft plans over the coming weeks and months, and to agree to regular updates on progress with the development of this work as we move forward. Thanks, convener.
Thanks, Leanne. I only see one question on the board, and that's Councillor Linden. Councillor Linden.
Yeah, many thanks, convener. The question, two questions really. Leanne, perhaps just for the record, it'd be helpful to understand what's meant by the section under elected members engagement 2.2.6.4, where it says local members were also able to participate in local stakeholder sessions. I'm not entirely clear what's been referred to there. I recall only one session for elected members, that was in terms of a separate briefing session, an engagement session, and there was the community board briefing information session. That's the only thing that I recall elected members being invited to. So I think for the record that's important for clarity, because there was, I guess, some concern from elected members that they were being, and I'll use the phrase, although I know that it's not the intention, it being frozen out of the process in terms of engagement. I know that elected members had particularly asked to be involved in the community listening events and to listen in and engage with I guess, their community and what they were saying are priorities in terms of the local outcome improvement plan. And whilst understanding the rationale as a community worker in terms of officers not wishing to have councillors present because perhaps there's an opportunity for the community to be more direct and perhaps share more of their views about the council and council services. Nonetheless, elected members are, by virtue of being elected in their community, key partners in said communities. So I think that was a disappointment for some members not being able to be involved. And I know that Lisanne's on the call. Lisanne and I have had a conversation about this, and I think it's important for the record that we mention that moving forward, there will perhaps be a development of a three-stranded approach, which is a community-only, community stakeholder approach, an elected member-only approach, and a shared community and elected member approach, so that we have that holistic council-wide feedback as we move forward with the development of the LOIP. Thanks, Leanne, and thanks, Convener. I hope that's helpful, but also a question to put it on the record there.
Thanks for that question, Councillor London. Happy to respond to that. So in terms of when we're talking about elected member engagement, so you're quite right, there was the briefing sessions that were around the community boards and the development of the LOIPs and the process side of it, where we invited elected members along to 3 sessions to have that targeted discussion. That was much more about the process. We also, as well as the wider community survey, which elected members were more than welcome to feed into, there was also a specific survey that was sent out targeted to elected members to encourage feedback from elected members. In terms of the locality work, elected members, as far as I am aware and understand, we're encouraged or we're able to participate in the local stakeholder session. So there was in each of the 9 areas, there was a local stakeholder session, and there was also a community listening event. The local stakeholder session was targeted more to kind of, I suppose, established community networks, community groups that were established, partner agencies within localities, whether voluntary or statutory sector, but with those who operated at a locality level. Within the community listening events, you're right that there was an effort made to keep the officer and elected member involvement in those sessions to a minimum where possible, and that was purely because we were trying to attract engagement from those who wouldn't necessarily normally participate. So there was some very targeted work, as I mentioned earlier, through services and through some of the equalities networks, etc., that was very targeted to particular groups of people. But there was also a more generic listening event at each of the 9 areas, which was very much targeted. And I suppose what we wanted to do was to encourage as broad participation as possible in those sessions with limited participation from officers or elected members at that point. So we were trying to give that opportunity for elected member targeted activity, elected member and community, because the stakeholder sessions, anybody could participate. I suppose they were maybe just a wee bit more targeted towards established groups and elected members, etc. And then the community only through the listening events. So if there's been any kind of misunderstanding there, or we will obviously take the feedback from elected members and look at that moving forward and make sure that elected members feel much more involved in the development of that process in future. There was no intention to exclude elected members. Clearly the role of elected members is very, very important in this process. So, you know, it's just about, I suppose, getting the balance right as we move forward, and happy to engage with elected members further about how we can improve that, and we've noted feedback to date.
Okay, Councillor London. Yep. Okay, there are no other questions. Do we agree to note the report? Yep. Okay. Next item is yourself again, Leanne, and it is in your progress tracker. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Convener. So this report sets out the kind of developing approach to tracking progress around the key areas of work associated with the community empowerment, to support the Community Empowerment Committee and its governance of the delivery of the Council and Community Planning Partnerships framework for working with communities. So it covers a number of areas, and it is a work in progress, but it was really just to bring to committee an outline of how we see that approach to tracking progress going. So certainly the detail in terms of performance indicators, etc., are still still being worked up, but it was really just to keep committee cited in terms of the approach that we're taking at this point. So the approach supports the statutory duty in the Council again in respect to the Community Empowerment Act and the reporting requirements of that, and also in the performance framework associated with the delivery of the plan for North Lanarkshire. The approach to tracking progress presented covers the community boards, the development of the local outcome improvement plans, engagement around the vision, for example, town and community hubs and town visions, digital communities, mainstreaming participatory budgeting, and the approach to strategic investment and in partnership with the voluntary sector. The Community Empowerment Committee, alongside the NLP Strategic Leadership Group, provides the governance for the framework for working with communities. The streamlined arrangements for community planning through the NLP Strategic Leadership Group facilitates oversight of community planning activities at a strategic level, providing assurance that community planning is effective in line with the duties on community planning partnerships within the Community Empowerment Act. While the Community Empowerment Committee also provides governance around the Council's duties as a key and in many ways lead partner in the community planning process, many of the activities also do sit within the scope of the partnership and therefore require adequate senior partnership support and leadership also. So the 9 community boards also play a really important and evolving role around the governance and accountability for locality delivery. So the aim, I suppose, is to start to focus on delivery through these mechanisms and linked to also, I suppose, internally within the council, we've got a community empowerment working group that's responsible for ensuring the implementation of the key parts of the Community Empowerment Act across the council, and also reflecting the work around recovery, renewal, investment approaches. And you may well be aware that last week, the Social Renewal Advisory Board, of which the community boards and work locally fed into, the national work around that, around recovery and renewal investment, they published a report last week titled If Not Now, When? And we would make sure that the key strands of that are reflected throughout the performance framework and also the development of the LOIPs. Ultimately, the impact to action and activity associated with these key areas of work that are highlighted throughout this report will be measured through the performance framework associated with the plan for North Lanarkshire and therefore the high-level health check indicators for North Lanarkshire as a whole. So longer term, we will be measuring against the outcomes and the impact against those kind of key indicators. However, what we've started to do is to look at how, over I suppose a shorter term period, can we start to measure the effectiveness of the approaches that we are taking and how the impact that might be having in a particular community. So Appendix 1 provides an outline of the proposed approaches and types of measurements and milestones that we may use or that we could use. For example, how will we know that the boards or the LOIPs are working in terms of the approach rather than the impact or the outcome? As the LOIPs, for example, evolve too, so too will the approach to measuring impact of action, and it's anticipated that local health check indicators would emerge through that very targeted work, i.e. what do we specifically want to improve in a particular area. Appendix 2 is a framework for reporting on progress using more kind of project management methodology, and it's much more focused on those leadership discussions and considerations that would be required through committee and through the strategic leadership group. And that's really about strategic accountability and decision making around things like risk and resource management. So committee is asked to endorse the developing approach to tracking progress in terms of the delivery of the Working with Communities framework, and to agree to receive further progress updates based on the templates provided within reports at Appendices 1 and 2. Happy to take any questions, Convener.
Thanks, Leanne. I only see one question. Councillor Brannan McVeigh.
Convener, just a short comment. I think this is an exceptionally brief and succinct report for what is an immensely complex issue. I really welcome it. I think it's so important, and if it creates the opportunity for us to have this dashboard, if you like, of progress, I think it will make a real impact in the transparency of information locally and across North Lanarkshire. So just to congratulate the team and all of their efforts in getting that to this stage, and I look forward to seeing the evolution of it, so I wholeheartedly endorse it, Convener.
Thanks very much, Councillor Brannan McVeigh. I'm sure the officers appreciate the thanks. They don't always get it. Thank you so much. Do we approve the report? Yep. Okay, if we can now move on to positive, a very positive report again, and it's Jonathan, it's the Syrian resettlement.
Thanks very much, Convener, and good morning, everyone. This report provides committee with an update on the current status of the Syrian resettlement programme in North Lanarkshire and provides a summary of the most recent developments on the introduction of the new UK Global Refugee Programme, which was scheduled to commence in April 2020. North Lanarkshire, as you'll be aware, has participated in the Syrian resettlement programme since its inception in 2015 and has so far settled up to 50 families across the area. The programme has been successful as recorded elsewhere. The Syrian resettlement programme actually came to an end in early 2020, and at the same time the UK government published information about a replacement programme, the UK Global Refugee Programme, which was seeking confirmation from councils about their willingness to continue to participate in refugee resettlement. However, implementation of the new programme has been suspended for some time by the Home Office due to the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. Paragraph 2 describes the new Global Refugee Programme consolidating several different programmes into one, and recent history of the lead into the new programme. It also provides some initial thoughts on future participation and how future support arrangements should potentially be organised. Paragraph 2.3 provides an update on some of the current work, in particular the work carried out to support the first group to apply for indefinite leave to remain, delivered in partnership with Ethnic Minority Law Centre. The process went very smoothly despite its complexity. The report also provides a short budget update. However, since the report was drafted and sent through for committee, COSLA have provided a further update last week on the new UK programme, and have confirmed that Home Office have confirmed their intention to continue resettlement to the UK beyond the Syrian resettlement programme. The message from the Home Office confirmed agreement for the UK to continue that activity once the VPRS commitments are fulfilled, and details are still to be finalised and be shared in due course. However, meantime, COSLA are keen to hear early thoughts about resettlement to the council areas in 21-22, and would like to revisit commitments made when planning for the VPRS back in 2015. This will help us and the Home Office to determine potential capacity for resettlement and plan for delivery. Therefore, I'm suggesting, in light of the new information, that we'll be returning at various levels with more information about what's been negotiated. There were particular concerns about sustainable funding levels going beyond the last spending review and so on. So all that's still to be clarified. However, it's recommended that Community and Parliament Committee note the progress with the current programme, note the position in relation to the new Global Refugee Programme, and agree to submission of a further report to committee when the national position is clearer. And I'm happy to take any questions.
I don't see any questions on the chat bar, Jonathan, but again, a positive report, and it's interesting to see that we have people applying to extend their leave in the UK and also possibly going for citizenship. Very positive report. Someone else come in. Councillor D. Ashraf, sorry. Didn't see you there, you just come in.
Thank you. Sorry, I sent my mistake. I'm
sorry, Councillor Ashraf, you're breaking up very badly.
Oh, 1 second, I'll turn my video off. 1 second.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yes, that is, yeah.
Much better, Councillor Ashraf.
No worries. I'll turn the video off. I was saying I did have a question regarding whether it would continue or not, because the North Lanarkshire's reports, I mean, from the report, it looks like we're leading in many ways, and the team looks like they've done an incredible job for very, very vulnerable people. And it's good news to hear that it's going to be continuing, and hopefully the team here in North Lanarkshire can continue that UK leading approach. So just a comment on the work that's been done so far.
Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Ashraf. It is a very positive report, and it is nice to see that people are being welcomed within North Lanarkshire, very, as you say, very vulnerable people. Okay, do we approve and note the report? Yep. Okay, if we can move on to next item, which is yourself again, Jonathan, and it is community grants.
Thanks, Convener. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with an update on progress with the 2021 Community Grants Programme. Members will recall that qualifying criteria were amended in May 2020 to take into account government guidance on COVID-19, and because of the onset of the second wave, the continuation of that amended criteria for October and November's grant payments. However, it was agreed that due to the need to support community wellbeing, some festive-related activities were funded. A full breakdown by area of all funded progress to date is attached from an Appendix 1 to 6 for your perusal. And I have to say that really impressive pieces of work by some of the community groups who've adapted wholeheartedly and supported lots of activities to get communities through the whole pandemic. In terms of recommendations, it's recommended to note the progress for the programme, considering the revised criteria to mitigate COVID-19 impact in the local community, and agree the proposal to keep the revised criteria under continuous review as Scottish Government and local measures change in response to the pandemic, and to ensure that infection risks are managed effectively. I'm happy to take any questions on that one.
Thanks, Jonathan. I don't see anyone on the chat bar. So do we approve the report? Yep. Okay. Again, it is the next one, and it's building community capacity. Is that yourself again, Jonathan?
It is, yeah.
It's your lucky morning.
Who knows? Let's see. In line with the plan for North Lanarkshire programme of work, the purpose of this report is to provide an update for the Community Empowerment Committee on progress made with the development of community and voluntary sector commissioning and strategic investment as a proposed alternative way to fund and support third sector to allow them to work with partners and deliver the plan for North Lanarkshire. The report covers a related proposal to develop, as a first phase in establishing the commissioning approach, a service level agreement and with Voluntary Action North Lanarkshire to support the development of the relationship with the community and voluntary sector in North Lanarkshire, how they support communities through working in partnership with the public sector. The report also seeks in principle approval to explore the establishment of a 3-year funding agreement with Voluntary Action North Lanarkshire from 21 to 24, subject to annual review, and to provide additional funding during 21-22 to enable VANEL to continue to support community and voluntary sector activities in accordance with the programme of work, such as the consolidation of the community boards, the locality, the local outcome improvement planning processes, and linked engagement activities in line with North Lanarkshire framework for working with communities. The report goes on to provide a summary definition of a typical SLA and a description of the proposed model funding agreement to be offered to VANEL. In addition, and in recognition of the present and future role to be played by VANEL, it is proposed to provide an additional funding to the organisation during 21-22. The sum proposed is around 30,000, which is to be funded from underspend identified within the grants programme. A summary of the type of work undertaken and a proposal to review future funding arrangements for the community and voluntary sector is also included. I have to point out, however, that a revised version of the SLA taken into account, the funding will be produced and brought back to the next cycle for final approval once we gain the approval for the funding mentioned above. Paragraph 2.3 also describes other developments, including the role of community anchor organisations and support for community boards, the role for and funding arrangements for other local organisations to improve local funding mechanisms, local outcome improvement plans, and the links to the Community Solutions Programme. Finally, the report makes reference to other areas of work such as economic development and in particularly the growth of community wealth building and the obvious connections between the strategic investment and commissioning approach and that particular new area of work. It's recommended that the committee approve the proposal to establish an in principle 3-year funding agreement with Voluntary Action North Lanarkshire, subject to an annual review incorporating an integrated service level agreement, that the Head of Communities in consultation with the Head of Legal and Democratic Solutions finalise the best value approach to the funding agreement SLA with Voluntary Action North Lanarkshire, and the developing approach to commissioning and investment in the community and voluntary sector, and a related proposal to award an additional funding uplift of around 15% to VANEL during 21-22 to cover the specific programme of work outcome linked activities as outlined in section 2.2.2 above. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's good to see stability for proposed stability for an organisation such as VANEL, who do so much in North Lanarkshire. I just see one question, Councillor Linden.
Thanks, Convener, and I agree with your comments on the contribution of VANEL to a whole range of works that are carried out across North Lanarkshire. Nonetheless, my question is in relation to two elements of the report. Firstly, to seek absolute clarity and assurance. Sorry, there's a bit of background noise. To seek absolute clarity and assurance that whilst the report does seek in principle the agreement of a proposal to establish the 3-year funding agreement with VANEL, that will come back to committee with full detail, because frankly I know that my group would need to see the detail of what that looks like in practice before we agree to that, given the potential impacts it will have. More substantively though, Convener, in terms of today's paper, a sequence of reassurance around the accountability, I suppose, for want of a better expression, in relation to the proposal to give additional resource to VANEL in relation to the delivery of some of the council's key programmes of work activity, and obviously recognising that it is a partnership approach and that VANEL are, I guess, being commissioned to deliver some of that work, seeking a reassurance that ultimately the buck stops with the council in respect of the delivery of our key elements of our programme of work, particularly around community boards and the facilitation of community and voluntary sector work. I think it's important that we put on the record that whilst they are going to be key partners in delivering that, the ultimate responsibility for when things go right and for when things go wrong falls onto the shoulders of the council in respect of that community engagement. I think that's a really important underpinning principle for what we see in the report today. I'd like to take an opportunity to, I guess, congratulate the work of VANEL, as you did at the beginning, Convener, not only in terms of adapting in their response to COVID, which we've seen in terms of their anchor work, but also to their work on the LOIP and indeed in locality networks, often work that goes unseen, bringing together key partners and community stakeholders to drive forward the localised community agenda, a really important area of work for VANEL. So our thanks go on the record to them as well.
Jonathan,
yeah, just come back in on that.
For Councillor Linden.
Yeah. Just to offer reassurance that, as it alludes to in the section on the funding agreement, we're doing quite a lot of work to try and make sure that that is as watertight and as safe as possible for all parties, not just the council, to make sure that we have a method of working that keeps everybody kind of safe. And obviously VANEL will be subject to the same levels of scrutiny that all other recipients of grant funding receive going forward, and obviously it does mention constant review, and there will also be an opportunity for community boards to participate in that as well, because obviously one of the key links between the work of the organisation is their support for other community and voluntary sector organisations that will be working particularly closely with community boards going forward. So hopefully we can build in the levels of scrutiny that are required to ensure that they fulfil their obligations in full. The first question, could you remind me what the first question was?
Thanks, Jonathan. I always find
Come back to committee, is that correct? Councillor London?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thanks for reminding.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolute given. Yeah, that it will be a constant reporting needs to make sure that everybody is fully up to speed with the developments as they go forward. To make sure that this piece of work is delivered effectively for the benefit of all our communities.
Is that suitable, Councillor London? Yeah. Yeah, I'm quite sure that the head of legal will ensure that. Oh, sorry, I'm on mute. Quite sure that it will be a watertight agreement with the head of legal. And as there are no other questions, do we approve this document? Yep. Okay. Thank you, people. We are now on to the next paper, which is tackling financial insecurity, and that is Lisanne and John.
Morning, convener. Thank you very much. I think, well, I'll start then, Lisanne. Sorry, I can't see you on the...
It would seem so, John. Feel free. I was just going to have a couple of opening remarks anyway, but I'm happy for you to present, John, and then I can come in if needs be.
Okay. The purpose of the report then is to advise the committee of the Scottish Government's additional flexible funding that was announced back in October last year in relation to coping with the pandemic. The committee may be aware that around £30 million was set aside last year. It was sort of kind of more finalised in November with an initial £26.95 million being allocated money for free school meals, and then £20 million being left over for councils to use as they saw fit within their own area, with North Lanarkshire being awarded £1.55 million. The Tackling Poverty Task and Finish Group and the CMT both agreed and approved the proposals that had been taken forward to them back in December as to how this money should be used. Primarily that is outlined in 2.5 and then 2.6 of the report. That was to have a payment within North Lanarkshire that was similar to the Scottish winter payment, which local authorities administers in their behalf, and that was £100 for every child who were eligible for free school meals. That we would do a similar type payment in January, with January always being a hard month for most folk, and even more so considering the current circumstances. Also to allocate £25,000 to Lanarkshire Community and Food Health Partnership to deal with core costs, transport and food provision, ensuring that all food banks and the community groups who are providing food within North Lanarkshire are supplied with food. And then for further proposals be taken back to the Task and Finish Group and CMT in relation to how the remaining funds would be used between now and the 31st of March. So that's the report. Well, from my point of view, a report on the report. I'll hand over to Lisanne then.
Thanks, John. Through you, convener. I don't have much to add, really just to point out this is important Scottish Government funding that we've had to react to with not a huge amount of time to develop systems and approaches that are aligned to normal processes for financial disbursement that audit are happy with. So members are advised that we are working really hard to make sure that this money does get to the right people through methods that perhaps we haven't used in the past, but we still need to assure that we can account for important public money, but it needs to get into people's pockets, as John has highlighted, by the 31st of March, and we will keep governance structures informed as we can, given that particularly aggressive timescale we want to make this work. Thank you, Convener.
Thanks, Lizanne and John. I see two questions, one from Councillor London, three, sorry, one from Councillor London, one from Councillor Fotheringham and one from Councillor Brand McVeigh. So we'll start with you, Councillor London.
Many thanks, Convener, and if you indulge me, I'll have a strand of questions on this particular report for officers. I wonder if officers could perhaps outline or clarify for me a bit clearer the route that this particular proposal has taken in getting to committee. As far as I understand from what John has said, I guess the essence of what's been referred to in terms of the £100 payment is and perhaps a nod to the head, John will confirm that it's the North Lanarkshire Child Payment is what's been referred to. Is that the case? Yes, thanks. The nod of the head is appreciated. Thanks, Lizanne. Accordingly, then, I guess it's somewhat bizarre that in considering the report, I don't actually see any specific reference to the North Lanarkshire Child Payment insofar as the branding and associated communications package that has came with it. And I guess that sort of stimulates my question in respect of how it arrived at committee today, but has already enjoyed widespread reporting and branding. If it's not yet been approved by committee. Obviously a welcome initiative. I think there can be no doubt about that. I want to make that abundantly clear. I think that enhancing the support that goes to our children and our families is absolutely the right thing to do. But I guess the importance of procedure and how we get here and that branding is important, because I note in section 2.5 the FIT along with the convener and Education and Families had dialogue around these three key areas, and I just want to be nice and clear around procedure. If committee's been asked today to approve that approach, how we ended up with a full communications package and publication in advance of committee without committee approval, I think that's a very important point, and hope officers can address that first of all. Secondly, Convener, I just want to reiterate and take the opportunity, I guess, to welcome the substance of the report. I think it's incredibly important. I also really want to welcome, and I'm glad to see Lanarkshire Community Food and Health Partnership within the report as well. Gordon and his team do incredible work working with our food banks and others right across North Lanarkshire to get food support to those who need it most, and I think it's important that our thanks go to him and to all those who are helping with essential food support, not only now in coronavirus but generally speaking. And then thirdly, Convener, and thank you for your indulgence, it relates to perhaps at that point I began with around the communications package as we move forward, because as officers will hopefully confirm in response to this question, I understand that the £100 payment, the North Lanarkshire Child Payment, will be fully funded by Scottish Government, just for clarity in respect of where the funding is coming from. And therefore, similar to the approach we adopted with Club 365 when my group were absolutely delighted to work with the administration to introduce that really innovative approach, we raised the point about that partnership between Scottish Government and local government in terms of our communications. And I just wonder if we can seek a reassurance that as we move forward with the publication of the North Lanarkshire Child Payment, we'll see that recognition that it's a funded project with Scottish Government in partnership with the local authority, more clearly, whether that be in video communications or indeed on publications online, because ultimately it's about us all working together to get money into the pockets of those who need it most in the most challenging of times. Thanks, Convener.
All right, is it Lizanne or John who's going to respond to Councillor London's first point?
I'll come in initially, then John can pick up any of the details.
Okay, Lizanne.
In terms of the decision making around the payment that Councillor London, the child payment that Councillor London's referring to, and the reporting around that and the governance, this is COVID-related funding. There is a timing issue in terms of the most appropriate time to make the payment as proposed in the report to CMT initially. And it's my understanding that this has happened before in terms of COVID-related funding. CMT has taken decisions and then informed committee at a later stage because of the importance of the timing of getting the money into people people's pockets. And John can come in and provide you a bit more detail from, I suppose, the financial inclusion team's perspective on that, knowing the hardship that individuals face on a day-to-day basis and the importance of the timing of getting that payment out. The reason that the terminology that was mentioned later in communications isn't in the report, because the report timing is very much aligned to the similar report that went to CMT, and that communications campaign around the release of the payment hadn't been determined when this report was prepared initially, and that is quite often the case where the communications planning around a financial payment or something similar, a grant payment, is concluded later, and that the officers deal with the head of communications in that matter. But happy to let John come in and clarify some of the points around the importance of the timing of the payment.
Thanks, Convener. So the route to committee primarily came from the Tackling Poverty Task and Finish group, who endorsed the sort of kind of proposals back on the 16th of December as how the money could be used, and then ultimately, as Lisanne pointed out there, being approved by the CMT to make the payment, really, and then coming to the committee today to get some sort of kind of homologation approval of the spend of the money. In relation to the brand, there was a meeting with corporate comms to talk about the name. We were talking about similar to the Scottish Government winter payment, and there is reference to a winter fuel payment, a fuel payment as well. However, when we were looking at obviously going out and talking to the community, you know, it's felt that there already was a winter fuel payment, there was a cold weather payment, you know, and there was a possibility of people being confused. Hence, it was decided to have a payment because we were wanting to do something particular around our child poverty strategy, to call it an NLC child payment. So that's in the sense of the name and the name and the branding of it. And I think, you know, it's been clear in the reports that, you know, there is Scottish Government funding that has come in. And obviously corporate comms were you know, decided how that would be communicated to outwardly to the public.
Sorry, Convener, but I'll have a supplementary. I'm sure you would anticipate.
Yeah, and I think Councillor McNally would also like to pass a comment. Is it on Councillor London's question, Councillor McNally?
Well, Councillor McNally is.
No, it's just I just was wanting to check before I would be cutting one of the others out first.
Oh, I would hope that isn't the case, Convener, given that Councillor McNally is just a member of the committee like everybody else. No. She's not here to comment on anybody else's contributions. I'm sure that's what you were clarifying.
Cut you out.
Sorry,
I'm happy to allow you to chair the meeting, Convener.
Councillor Linden, I am not trying to cut you out. I was trying to check something with Councillor McNally, if his comment that he said he wished to make a comment, if it was in relation to yours or something else in the paper. Because otherwise, Councillor Fotheringham and Councillor Barron McVeigh would be fine.
As a comment more broadly, Convener, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. No, I entirely understood exactly what you were saying, Convener, but I was just simply highlighting that Councillor McNally will need to wait just like everybody else in the committee. You know, he's not here to comment on any other members.
Councillor Linden, I'm quite well aware of that.
That's great. And asking my supplementary then, Convener, thank you. I think that we need clarity on that point in relation to Scottish Government branding from officers, because it's simply not good enough to say that the reports reflect that the Scottish Government are part funding this initiative. And let's be clear, the focus really should not be on the branding. That's a distraction and a side point, because ultimately getting the funding to those who need it is the priority, rightly so. But I do want to seek a reassurance from officers that if it's not clear today from our contributions, that they go back and they speak to corporate communications to ensure that as we move forward, whether it be in video format or whether it be in written form, that we recognise the partnership working between local government and national government to get the funding to those who matter most. And I hope that that's a reassurance that we can be provided with, Convener.
Can we reassure Councillor Linden, Lisanne?
Yes, I can give that reassurance.
Thank you. Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you, Convener. I'm a member of the working group. So, and I really welcome this report to the committee today. And firstly, I want to thank all the staff and the officers who have been working in the group, and they're basically bringing forward, they know they've been working with the most vulnerable people in our communities throughout this pandemic. They know exactly who the most vulnerable are and how quickly, as Lisanne said, this money has to be spent quickly. And they are the best people to consult with to get the money in the pocket of sort of people who need it quickly. And I really obviously welcome that, and my thanks to all those staff and officers that have been leading that. It is important to highlight, as Councillor Linden already said, the reports are very clear about the Scottish Government funding, but the communications aren't just as clear as that. And I must admit, even being on that committee, it raised confusion for me because I had no idea where this child payment came from. And I was obviously being asked from members of my community, even from my group, what was basically going on. And I couldn't answer that question because I was confused. There was discussion in the group, quite rightly, that the money had to be paid quickly, what mechanisms could we use, but the general money was discussed in the volume of the body of the report. There was no recommendations attached to the report, it was discussed within the body of the report. I'm more than happy to make sure that that money is given right into the pockets of the people who need it quickly. So no problem with that at all. But there is nothing in the report, recommendations, or even in the minutes of the Tackling Poverty group, even to confirm that money being awarded and being agreed at the Tackling Poverty. So maybe that's something we should be taking forward as well. So that was a bit of the confusion. The discussion did take place around the winter fuel bills and the £100 payment being made on top of the £100 of the Scottish Government hardship grant. So again, the confusion comes back to where this North Lanarkshire child payment came from. And I know that the rebranding was maybe required because it was confusion with the Scottish Government's the hardship payments and the winter fuel payments, but it's now confusing also with the Scottish Government's child payment, and a lot of people are now getting confused with that as well, so it maybe isn't the best name for it. My concern was the release of the video, because even on the group, I had no idea on that video what Councillor McNally was actually referring to with an NL child payment, even being part of that discussion. The funding source is the Scottish Government, and that wasn't mentioned in the video communications. And I also understand that it came to the Tackling Poverty group, it then went to CMT, but it was only changed the name when it went to comms. It wasn't changed prior to that. It hasn't been agreed with anyone on committees. It was only so that needs to be something we have to reflect on future moving forward. That the funding sources really should be. It's quite misleading for the public and very confusing even to us as councillors, not even being briefed or nothing coming out to us. Not just the group itself, but the councillors as a whole, being able to answer questions from their communities. There should have been a briefing really came out to us so that we knew where that decision had been taken and where that money came from, and that should have been done. On a positive note, we do have a meeting this week, a special meeting to discuss the rest of the funding. And again, I would really welcome officers' input to that, because as I said before, they're the best people that know the most vulnerable people in our communities. And I would just reiterate again, moving forward, that the funding sources are made very clear. It is Scottish Government funding, and that was not said, and that has not been communicated. So any further releases go out following the special meeting, then I would like to make sure that the sources are also very clear. And that's all I've got to say. And thank you again to the officers. Thank you.
I think Councillor Fotheringham, you've been given reassurance by Lisanne earlier. Okay. Councillor Brannan McVeigh.
Thanks very much, Convener. I welcome the report, and indeed I welcome the speed in which the information has got out to the communities about this essential payment. Afford to hang about for a committee cycle when we have got children who need support, and indeed they need fed. So I welcome the speed in which the work has been done, and I'm disappointed that we've got into a pedantic discussion about branding, because you know what, the government is supposed to fund councils, you know, and sadly we're in the position where that doesn't always happen. That's not my point in this. and it's regarding the criteria. I'm very aware that the circumstances of a number of families have changed considerably during this pandemic, and
we're losing you, Councillor McVeigh. We're not hearing you. Can you put your video off, please?
Video. Hopefully this will help you hear me, convener. So my key question here is the circumstances of families have significantly changed for many families in North Lanarkshire during COVID-19 pandemic. Not all of those families will have applied for or previously been entitled to free school meals. So what have we done and how are we reaching those families and indeed those children whose circumstances have significantly changed during this period? And I suppose this speaks to the strength of the partnership that's there. I welcome response. Thanks, convener.
Would it be yourself, John, that would answer that one for Councillor Brandon McVeigh? Yeah.
It will be, convener. Councillor McVeigh, so we were aware of that. Obviously, when the payment was getting made for the Scottish Government winter payment, that was based on the sort of kind of estimated numbers of around 10,000 children at that time being eligible for the payment, and because they were eligible for free school meals. So the Scottish Government payment was originally paid out on the 22nd of December, but there was then a sort of kind of time lag put in that in case anyone had applied for free school meals just leading up just before the 22nd of December and then up to the 12th of January. So subsequently there was an additional payment made on the 15th of January to those people who became eligible for free school meals during that time frame. So we've made sure that for the North Lanarkshire Child payment that there will be a similar type period. So if anyone becomes entitled to free school meals between the 25th of January to the 12th of February, then they will receive the payment on the 15th of February. So therefore we're ensuring that if people's circumstances do change, that they're sort of kind of captured. And indeed the original number, as I said, was 10,000 back in December, but at the time the Scottish Government winter payment was made, the final payment made on the 15th of January, there was 10,826 children eligible for free school meals. So that we do expect some people to come into the receipt of free school meals between the 25th of January and the 12th of February, and they will receive a payment. And that's how we intend to capture that sort of kind of change of circumstances for people.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Brandon McVeigh? It's actually quite scary, John, that almost 10% increase in that short time, and how many children are really dependent on this. Councillor McNally.
Thanks very much, convener. Just a few comments on some of the contributions. I think the main point has been missed here. We seem to be getting bogged down on branding and name changes and issues like that. The fundamental issue here is that there are 10,000 families in North Lanarkshire who are benefiting at this time from a significant support package that has been offered to them. The money has come from the Scottish Government. I should say to the members who have raised concerns about that if you actually look at the posting that was put out on social media on the 14th of January, it references the Scottish Government in the content of the post. It's also included in the press release that went out from corporate communications in relation to the Scottish Government contributing to this. They gave councils discretion to use that funding in a manner in which they saw fit. There are some councils not too far from here that have used it to shore up existing budgets and created no additionality for families in their communities. North Lanarkshire did not choose to do that. We took it through a structure that was set up and designed to allocate the funding from the Scottish Government in a particular way, and that is the Task and Finish group. That was then taken through the CMT structures that we have in place. And it was intended to come here simply for homologation. The Task and Finish group had already taken the decision, and that had been signed off by CMT. It arguably didn't even have to come to the committee chair, but that is a decision that has been taken. So I think the fundamental point here is that this funding is at this time supporting 10,000 families in children in North Lanarkshire. We are once again taking innovative steps to support those in the most need. And you know what? I'm not going to apologise for it. I'm not going to apologise to anyone for it. That is exactly what we should be doing, and we should be doing it in a timely manner. We should be doing it as quickly as we can to get it out there. We've had the winter payment from the Scottish Government, which we absolutely welcome. We now have a North Lanarkshire winter payment, and we're set to have the North Lanarkshire child payment, and now we're set to have the Scottish Government's child payment, which will be kicking in this month, hopefully at the end of this month, in which families have been applying for since November. So the council is taking fundamental steps here, and in terms of the funding element of it, the overwhelming budget of North Lanarkshire comes from the Scottish Government. I don't think that is a massive surprise to anyone. No one should be surprised. We get the vast majority of our money from the Scottish Government. We don't put the Scottish Government's branding over everything that we do. But let's be clear, we've taken the decision that we have. I stand by everything that has been done up to this point. It's been the absolute right decision. It's went through the process. It's been signed off by the Task and Fingers Group. And we should be proud that once again North Lanarkshire is supporting families in the most need across our communities.
Thanks, Councillor McNally. Councillor Fotheringham, I wouldn't normally let people back in when they've been in, but this time, since it's you, you're not everybody.
Thank you, Convener. No, I just wanted to reiterate, I completely agree with everything that Councillor McNally's actually said. You know, nobody is ever doubting that the payment isn't going to the right people, and it hasn't been done properly, and it isn't in the pockets of the right people, and it had to be rolled out fast. I'm on that group, completely agree with you. There is no issues with that, so I just want to put that on record. We are not disagreeing with anything like that. It was just that name changed, a bit of confusion. That is it, that's all.
Councillor Fotheringham, you made that perfectly clear when what you'd said at first, and I think we have got to praise the workings of that group. But more than anything, we have to praise the work of John and his financial inclusion team. I think the work that they do is tremendous to make sure that everyone who needs gets. And I think we have to be really, really proud of them. I don't see any further questions. So do we approve the report? Oh, sorry, Councillor Gourley, you're not on the chat bar, you're just waving. Okay. Councillor Gourley, have you got a question?
No, I
Mary.
had lost my sound, but it's back again.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, do we approve the report then? Yeah. Okay. We now go on to the next report, which is community boards, and it's a report on the community boards from Cycle 2, and that's Matt.
Thanks, Convener. The purpose of this report is to ensure the Community Empowerment Committee is kept informed regarding the work of the boards. The report covers, as I said, the second cycle of the meetings that took place in November, December last year, with a focus on community representation and involvement, a key enabler in the all-important ongoing direction and development of the boards and their standing within local communities. In the second cycle of the community board meetings, attendance reflected an improved mix of partners and elected members and community groups. At all the 9 board meetings, approximately 256 people attended the second cycle of board meetings, with 95 community representatives in attendance. It's roughly about 10 per board meeting, although some boards had more community reps than others. The live streaming of the boards is also viewed as being successful, with over 1,000 views across the 9 board areas. Lanarkshire Muslim women and families were represented at some of the board meetings in Cycle 2, and efforts will continue to further extend the reach of the community input to the boards, and continued work will be undertaken with local communities to ensure that seldom heard voices, black and minority ethnic groups and disability groups are regularly represented at future board meetings. In addition, a draft terms of reference document has been developed. This was circulated to board members in advance of the second cycle, Board members have been asked to provide comments via Community Matters, and have been seeing information coming back on that basis. This is also an item at the agenda at all meetings, and it's agreed that comments will be fed back in due course. There was also an increase in involvement in seldom heard voices, including the Families Alliance, MSYPs and Youth Forum members, Who Cares Scotland, who support care experienced young people, were also there and improved the attendance at the board meetings. So as referred to in the report, the importance of wider representation from local community and meaningful engagement and decision making was identified. So work with local community groups will continue to be a priority to address this proactively. And recently we've widened access to the community boards for the next cycle, and local groups will be contacted over the next week or so to ensure that we widen access to the next meetings going forward. So the Community Empowerment Committee has recommended to note the ways in which the communities have influenced the development of the boards during their second cycle of meetings and the ongoing work to enhance this, recognising the attendance at community boards has now been widened and further community representation is expected at the next round of board meetings. That's all from myself on that report, Convener.
Thanks, Matt. I hope you can all hear me because my connection's coming and going. And everybody, can someone let me know if they can hear me because I can't see anyone? Yep, you're all back. Councillor Linden, you're the only question there, right?
Thanks, Convener. Thanks very much. A really positive report on community boards.
Thank you.
A couple of highlights for me, Convener, before I move to a question. Firstly, section 2.1.1.2 of the report, I just wanted to again give another shout out to our young people who from our youth participation infrastructure. It's been absolutely amazing to see our MSIPs and youth council reps at the community boards, but not only at the community boards, but playing an active part and contributing to the dialogue. And in particular, it was welcome to see them not only just come to the community boards, but the town vision sessions, where I was pleased to see that our young people were making sure that the voices were heard on the vision for our town centres and on our community hubs, ensuring that they were sharing their representative credentials. I enjoyed the Bells Hill one, where one of the representatives, I think from Shotts, gently reminded officers that they have a democratic mandate and that they bring the views of the young people. I thought it was wonderful to hear such articulate young people sharing their views, and a tribute to them. Convener, as well, another again highlight, section 2.2.3.2 of the report on the number of people who watched the community boards, and I'm sure, Convener, it brings a smile to your face as much as it does to mine to see another Bells Hill badge with 497 views from Bells Hill alone. We're doing something right in Bells Hill, and it's great to see that engagement, Convener. I just wanted to again put on the record, and it's a sort of question and comment for officers to reflect upon. Again, my thanks to Lisanne in particular for her engagement recently. One of the criticisms or critiques of the community boards to date has been the lack of wider involvement of the ordinary punter, for want of a better expression, somebody who's got a burning issue in their community, whether they're in Liberty Road in Bells Hill or whether they're in Kenilworth in Wishaw. If they've got a passion, they can get along and hold our feet to the fire as elected members, and it's always been an opportunity at the LAP meetings to do that, and that was an element that's been missing from the community board. So I'm delighted with the change in Cycle 3 moving forward, following the representations of local people and elected members, that now the ordinary punter, for want of a better expression, can come and share their views at the town boards, and we're looking forward to all of us individually and collectively having the responsibility to encourage that participation, and also I'm sure looking forward to the myriad of inquiries that will come as a result. So thanks to Lisanne and the team for I guess the reflective practice in that regard.
Thanks, Councillor Linden. I'm sure the officers appreciate that. We are listened to, and we'll really need to stop selling Bells Hill all the time. We always seem to manage to find a way of mentioning them. I don't see any other questions. And do we note the report from Matt? Yep. Okay. And amazingly, we have got through this agenda really quickly. We are now at the last item in the agenda, and it is the Campsies Centre in Cumbernauld, and it's yourself again, Matt.
Thanks, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update on the approved projects within the Campsies board that have been approved previously are set out in Appendix 1 and commended by the Board of Directors that have been assessed in line with the Council's grant award scheme and provide an update on previously approved projects within the appendix. The report also advises regarding the current net balance of funds, which will be available after setting of debts and liabilities, and these will transfer to the Council for subsequent allocations of projects in Cumbernauld. Can I advise that the St Lucy's project, which is referred to within the report, is subject to further assessment and outcomes will be reported to the committee in relation to that. And can also advise that work is ongoing to deliver workshops for elected members and local community groups in relation to the application process, which was approved at a previous committee, and these will commence over the next week or so for elected members and then moving out to the further wider community to ensure that the processes going forward that will be required are as widely people are widely aware of it as possible. We're also working with corporate communications in the development of a communications plan for the Campsies board going forward, which will highlight as positively as possible the work that's been done by the Campsies board over the last few years and the projects that have been delivered locally. So the committee are asked to note the update on the approved projects and approve in principle the other projects, including the St Lucy's Group proposal for going forward, and note the progress and update in relation to actions by the corporate working group in undertaking due diligence and preparing the necessary resolutions to ensure the effective and timely transfer and subsequent dissolution of the Campsies Centre Cumbernauld Limited. That's all from myself on that one, Convener.
I don't see any questions, so if we can approve the report, we all agreed? And I think that must be an all-time record for us. Can I thank you all for attending? Nice to see most people again, and a very positive meeting in that so many good things being done by officers in North Lanarkshire. Thank you all again. Goodbye.
Thank you, Chair.